What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is Cadman Cycling. Welcome back to another race breakdown. We are back at Crit City for an after work race. This will be 8 laps around the Crit City circuit for a total of 9.8 miles. And this was actually my favorite Zwift race of all time. It's a Monday night right now, so I just raced this Monday night after work. And I enjoyed it so much, I wanted to immediately jump into this race breakdown and just rewatch it, see what I did right, see what I did wrong, and yeah, just enjoy some good Zwifting. So here we are. Like I said, it's a Monday night after work, so it's a small field. I'm in Category C. So Category C is anyone who averages between 2.5 and 3.2 watts per kilogram. And I'm kind of in the middle. Generally on these short races that are under 10 miles, I'll average around 3 watts per kilogram. So definitely not the best of Category C, but I started this season in Category D, kind of worked myself up through fitness when I was racing multiple times per week during the winter when there's multiple snowstorms in our area. So a lot of Zwifting over the winter, a little less now in the summer. Now that there's some good weather here, I've been taking the bike off the trainer a bit more often, so not doing quite as many Zwift races, but that does mean when I get the bike back on Zwift, I'm generally feel a little bit better about the legs, just because I get some more rest. So this has just 13 riders. I'm not used to such a small field. Generally, in Category C Crit City races, I see 30 at minimum. Some races even have up to 60. So 13 is definitely a small race. I don't have any experience with this, so I'm interested in seeing how it goes. And like I said, this is one of the more interesting races that I've really tried within or experienced within Zwift. And for that, I'll actually give the full race breakdown here. So this will be a long video, around 25 minutes. So if you do just want to see the finish, feel free to skip ahead. But I'll be here kind of breaking down the race for the full 8 laps. If you guys want to hang out with me, feel free. So here we are on the first lap. If you saw in that first roller section, I kind of accidentally found myself out on the front. One of the things I immediately realized within this race was there's definitely a slower pace, and I think it's just because it's only maybe a third of the riders I'm used to in a normal race. There's just not as many people that are pushing it off the front. So this was definitely a slower pace to start out, which I'm happy with. So for those who haven't seen my races at Crit City before, my general strategy here at Crit City and really within most Zwift races is just hang on with the front pack as long as I can. And that partly is kind of just how I race, but it's also kind of interesting within Zwift is that's just overall a good Zwift strategy, because drafting within the group is one of the keys of a Zwift race. When you're in a group, you really just go so much faster than when you're alone, that any extra second, extra mile, extra lap that you can spend with the front group is more time that you're gaining on anyone behind you. So because of that, my strategy for pretty much every Zwift race is just stay with the front group, push myself to my limit so I can stay with them. And here, my heart rate is extremely low right now. Anything above 170, I really haven't seen at Crit City, especially now that we're on into the second lap. So it's definitely a slower pace. On the second lap, I got that ghost power up, as we have 3 riders off the front trying to make a little bit of a move. Of the 13 riders in this race, we still have 9 or 10 in this front group. And it'll stay that way for a decent amount of the race. But definitely don't want to let this group of 3 get away. So I do put in a little bit of a dig up to 530 watts. So that was I'm immediately back on the front, but that was definitely a wasted match there. in my head at the time, I was thinking, hey, we're here in a group of between 6 and 10 people. I wasn't exactly sure how large the group was. And we have a group of 3 off the front. But because the chase group was so small, I thought there was a chance that, hey, if these 3 riders are really pushing it 300, 400 watts for a minute or so, they could get away. So that's why I put in that quick dig to just catch back on the group. But I think I just accelerated way too quickly. Definitely did not need 530 watts there. So that was kind of just one match that I burned early on in the race. This is a still slow pace, but definitely don't want to be burning matches early when I don't have to. So rewatching that here, that's definitely something I'll learn for next time is maybe I'll get it up to 300 watts and catch back on that group, because I think it was the right decision. I didn't want them to get away, so I needed to catch on, but definitely didn't need to do it as quickly as I did there. So if I just burst up to 300 watts instead of 530, 540 like I did, that's extra energy I'll have in my legs for the rest of the race. So we're nearing the end of the second lap here. I kind of have been bouncing around between the front of the group and the back of the group. In part, that was just due to the slow pace. A lot of times when I found myself on the front, I really wasn't pushing more than 200 watts. So it's not like I was putting in unnecessary efforts within the group. So a few times I found myself on front, but didn't see a huge issue with that. On the last lap, I got the ghost power up, where you kind of disappear for just maybe 5 seconds. So it's not very helpful within these races. This lap, I got a featherweight. So the most kind of hilly section of this course is this roller section. And it gets more hilly as the rollers go on. So there's 4 or 5 rollers. Each one has kind of a steeper gradient than the one before it. So I actually kind of misused my featherweight there. As we see, this guy in front of me just used his featherweight. I used it immediately going into that roller section. So I used it for maybe the first 2 or 3 rollers, which are the easiest ones to get over. So again, that would be my second lesson learned of this race of I should have used that featherweight maybe halfway through the roller section. So I had it for the last 2 or 3 rollers that get up to a 10% gradient. So again, very slow pace. I'm under 200 watts, but I'm just starting to notice kind of those points where I used a little bit more energy than required or misused a power up. Because in races like this, that it's a slow pace, can definitely come down to a sprint finish. Not saying this one did, but when it comes down to a sprint finish, really every extra watt that you can put out at the end of the race is important, because you can have races decided by hundredths of a second. So it's definitely valuable kind of going back through this footage and seeing where I used a little bit extra energy when I didn't have to. As we see, a lot of riders had steamroller power-ups that time down the cobbled section. So we're nearing the end of the third lap. Again, feeling pretty good. My heart rate's at 174 beats per minute, which is crazy low for Crit City. I'm used to an average heart rate around 185, kind of spending the last few laps in the 190s at Crit City. So anything in the 170s, I feel pretty good. I'm not necessarily recovering, but kind of hanging in there all right. So generally, third lap at Crit City, I start to feel it in the legs, be hanging off the back every once in a while, trying my best to stay with the front group. Here I still feel strong, so I don't feel like I'm going to get dropped yet. Honestly, the legs felt pretty good today as well. As we get to the end of this third lap, we'll see what power up I get this time around. And as I hang off the back, I see I'm in 9th place. So it looks like of the 13 riders, we still have 9 in this front group. So that's a part of the testament to this was a slow race. But we'll see where it goes from here. It's definitely kind of new territory, a smaller front group. So I did get that invisibility power up again. This is one I really haven't gotten that often, but I got 2 out of the first 4 laps. Again, I kind of just immediately use it because in the middle of the race, that ghost power up isn't going to do much for me. I was kind of thinking during the race, when would be the best time to use that ghost power up? When could it be most valuable? And I'm really thinking it would just be at the kind of very end of a race, a sprint finish. If you're kind of coming into 0.3 miles left maybe and want to go a little bit early, you could use that ghost power up, go early before the field is expecting it. And if the field can't see you, maybe you'll be able to build that gap to the point that you've already won the sprint almost before it started. But that's not the case here. That's not what I'm trying to do. So I'll just go ahead and use it and see what other power-ups I can get on the next few laps. And I think that ghost power-up really wouldn't have to be just for that last lap. Anytime you want to make a dig and kind of try to make the field work behind you, you could use that ghost power up. But again, that's kind of a strategy that you see more in races in the real world of kind of these attacks and counter attacks. You just don't see that as much in Zwift, at least not in the C category. It's more about just hanging on for the sprint finish. You really don't see many breakaways stay away. And that's probably partially just due to the overall expertise of the riders. Maybe you see that a little bit more in A races, but not here in C races. But I think it's also due just to the drafting abilities within Zwift. It seems like draft is just more important within Zwift. So it's just harder to stay away as a lone rider. So any kind of attack or counterattack is almost hurting yourself, but not really hurting the rest of the riders as much as you would like it to. So that's definitely a strategy difference between this indoor racing within Zwift and then outdoor racing. Again, I just started using Zwift this year, so this was my first experience in bike racing at all. And honestly, I just got into cycling recently, so Zwift has been my first opportunity to do some racing. Haven't had the chance to sign up for any outdoor races yet, although I'd love to do that in the future. So I got a featherweight this time around. Again, I'll try to learn from last time. So last time I used the featherweight a little bit too early, but honestly, going into this lap, I couldn't remember where I triggered the featherweight a couple laps ago. So I know to wait. So we're up the first roller. I haven't triggered it yet. Bottom of the first roller going into the second is when I trigger it. So I waited a little bit longer. I waited till after the first roller. But as I'll learn again, is the featherweight is a pretty quick power up. It doesn't last that long. So now we're on the last 2 rollers, just over the second to last, and then last uphill here. And I don't have my featherweight for those last 2. So again, learning experience. I triggered it a little bit later than I did the first time, but still not late enough. I think ideally you go over the first 2 small rollers, then trigger the featherweight. So again, just learning as I go along. It's nice. My heart rate's at around 180 beats per minute now. So I'm starting to work a little bit harder, but still not really hurting yet. So I am I'm not at the point of exhaustion that I'm not thinking about anything else. I am kind of noticing how long did this featherweight last, so I can use that on future laps. And again, that's part of rewatching this also helps me learn and become a better Zwift rider. But going back to the outdoor riding, I have signed up for a few just outdoor rides. There's a 50-mile outdoor ride that I'm doing in a few weeks, and then I'm taking a longer trip in the fall to a pretty cool hilly region of the U.S. To do like a Fondo ride, which should be pretty fun. I'm not sure if they have timed sections there. I know they still have like rest stops and everything, but should be a good time. Really, bike riding is just such a great way to see the outdoors, experience different areas that you can't really see when you're driving a car on a highway, going through the forest and everything when you're on a bike, and just, I don't know, seeing areas of the country that you wouldn't see otherwise. So we're getting into kind of a critical point in the race. We're lap 5 of 8, so we're over halfway, 3.8 miles left. We still have this full group. Looks like there's still 9 of us here. Again, it hasn't been a crazy pace, so we really haven't dropped anyone. So coming in here, we have 3 laps to go. We'll see what power up I get this time. I get the ghost again, so third time I get the ghost this race. Again, not something I'm looking to get, so I'll just use it pretty quickly. And just all I'm thinking here is, hey, 3 more laps, we're getting close to the finish. It's a slow race, still feeling pretty good with this small group. So don't want to push it too hard. If somebody were to make an attack, I would want to have enough energy to hold on. So I myself am not going to make any attacks, but feeling pretty good about where I stand. So we're kind of in energy conservation mode right now, in terms of I just want to use as little matches as I can and get to the finish, so I have as much for the sprint as possible. So I made a few mistakes earlier on in the race in terms of misusing power-ups, but I've been doing a bit better of a job on the last few laps to save as much energy as possible. Don't want to put in any unnecessary digs, but also don't want to find myself off the back. Again, it's a small group here, so we're not moving as quickly, but if there's eight riders in a group in front of me and I'm just hanging off the back, it's easy to get dropped, especially with the new drafting within Zwift. So we're going back down the cobbled section, and my strategy here is I kind of take it easy first half of the cobbled section, but generally I then try to push it once we get to the bottom. I find that a lot of riders will take it easy down the cobbled section, but once they get to the bottom, they continue to take it easy for a few seconds before putting in some watts to keep the speed. So I can kind of hang off the back on that downhill, and then if I just get it up to, it doesn't have to be much, just 250 watts at the bottom. It's easy to hang on with the group and even kind of coast to the front sometimes. So here again, I find myself on the front, but I'm at 150 watts. So really, I have no issues being up there. Pushing 150 watts isn't like I'm pushing extra wind on the front that I don't need to be. So I'm not burning matches. I'm kind of fine with the surges. So I'm still, I push it a little bit to 270 watts, which I don't want, but really just trying to be as consistent as possible. That's what really makes, I think, the good Zwift racers. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if you all do this, but whenever I finish a Zwift race, I immediately look at kind of the average watts of all of the racers around me, and it's crazy how much they vary. Sometimes, say I end up in 5th place, I can see that the rider who got first place actually put out a less average watts per kilogram than me. Sorry, didn't mean watts, I meant watts per kilogram. So if I'm at 3.2 watts per kilogram, sometimes I could see the winner only put out 3.1 watts per kilogram, and that just means that they were much more efficient than me throughout the race. So I've been working on that to become as efficient of a rider as possible, which I think I'm getting a little bit better at now. Always trying to stay in the middle of the pack. All you have to do is win a race. To win a race is be the first across the line at the finish. You don't have to be pushing at the front and using watts you don't need. So this time around, second last lap. Usually the second last lap at Crit City is the slowest lap. People are kind of trying to get their heart rate down and ready for kind of a sprint of a final lap that they slow it down on the second last lap, which I think was the case here. It was generally a slow race, but this second last lap wasn't fast yet. I got the steamroller power up, which, thanks to some of the subscribers commenting on the videos below, really helpful, and I learned a lot from you guys. The steamroller power up only works on the cobbled section, so I learned that from my last race from the comments, because I had used a steamroller on that roller section thinking that the steamroller would work on the gravel, but turns out it doesn't. It only works on the cobbled. What the steamroller power up does is it's all about the rolling resistance. So on cobbles there's a higher rolling resistance than where we are now, which is back on the streets. So the steamroller will decrease that rolling resistance on certain sections of the course. But it turns out that kind of those gravel rollers are not one of those sections that the steamroller works on. So thanks to those subscribers, and I utilized it immediately, and it helped me on the second last lap on that steamroller down the cobbled climbs. So definitely another thing that I've learned within Zwift throughout these race experience, and here I am. I'm really exactly where I want to be. We're coming up on one lap left, and this upcoming lap will be the most exciting lap that I've ever raced at Crit City. I think it's interesting that it was a slow pace, but it wasn't just for me. I think a lot of the other riders were also saving their energy for this last lap. So I'm coming in with 180, 179 beats per minute. Legs are feeling good, lungs are feeling good. I'm kind of ready for someone to attack whatever's going to get thrown at me in this last lap. I don't have any plans to attack. Again, I like to wait till the sprint finish and see if I can out-sprint some of the riders. But I do have the energy, so I'm going to try to stay as much on the front as I can, because I know this is where it's going to pick up. We have only a mile left. I get that featherweight power up again, so no aero boost. I won't be saving it till the end of the race, but I have learned from the previous times around when to use the featherweight. So we're over the second roller, and I'll use it here once we get to start up the third roller. So again, that's kind of just the importance of when you're on a race that has multiple laps around, you can kind of learn each time around, whether it's on the second lap, kind of getting your bearing straight so you know where to start the sprint, or even just where to best use power-ups. So here we are, and this is where the games start. 0.8 miles left, and this guy just flies by out of nowhere. Immediately have two riders chasing, and they were at such a quick speed. I immediately get it up to over 400 watts because we're getting close to half a mile left, and I know that can stick. If they get those three on the front just pushing it, I mean, that guy came by so fast. He built such a quick lead immediately that I'm pushing it. So me and these other two riders, and now a fourth one coming down, are doing everything we can. I mean, it's almost like we're putting in a sprint effort just to catch these three ahead of us. Now half a mile left, still putting out 300 watts. Again, a lot of fun. Usually I wait for the sprint finish, but here we are, 400 watts in this group of four, and it looks like we're going to catch this group. So they put in a crazy hard dig, and we catch them with 0.4 miles left. Heartbeat's up to 192, so I'm feeling it. This guy in the black is almost counterattacking. Not quite, he's not sprinting, but continuing the hard effort. We're at 0.3 miles. We have a group still at the front group, so we're top 5 now, a few other riders close behind. 0.2 miles, immediately thinking about the sprint. I don't want to wait too long, so I kind of stand up quickly as this guy comes by with an arrow. Start putting out some watts just to stay close. We're at 540. I sit back down for a brief second and then immediately stand on it again and put out 680, 700, 740 watts. Just don't quite get it. So third place. That was such just a frantic last 0.8 miles. Made for a lot of fun though, and I enjoyed it. I felt good this race. I didn't win, but it just felt like more of a race. It wasn't all the sprint finish. There were guys making attacks on the last lap, so I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I love racing at Crit City, but I love racing everywhere else within Zwift. So if you're not subscribed and you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and check out some of my other races, some of my other tutorial videos. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. This is Cadman Cycling. Bye.